Hi everyone, this is Matthew. So we're going to look at another Arcane deep dive, and this time in the character of Mel. Now, Mel is an interesting character in that initially she starts off as basic kind of a Machiavellian type of character. You know, the one who really knows how to make the right political type of moves. Seems to be a modestly corrupt character, only out for herself. And that kind of cookie cutter type of character is a good foil for Silco. Now, Silco seems to be the quintessential James Bond-esque villain type of guy. You know, the guy from the underground. He's controlling all these organizations. He's got this big plot of, domination or at least independence. And you look at both of these characters, and as you kind of peel the layers out, you kind of see there's a bit more complexity. They're not quite what they appear to be at the very beginning. So we're going to look at how Mel changes over the entire series, try to figure out what is she really after. And that's kind of an interesting question because there are hints of it from the very beginning. So when we actually look at Mel in the first shot here, one of the characters mentions to Mel that she is the richest person in Pildover. Now, that sets a very interesting thing right there. So she's the richest person or one of the richest people. Again, it's hard to tell between whether that comment is flattery or actual real comment, especially, with the games that they play in Piltover. So you can see she probably has quite a bit of power just by that. But she's not satisfied with it. I mean, she comments that she's the poorest, person in Moderna. So you look at that, it's like, okay, she's from the house of Moderna. She's not happy with the fact she's the poorest person. She probably wants to, kind of go up in the ranking there. And she also makes another comment later that we need something revolutionary, something to put Piltover on the map. Now, in this case, so you kind of give an idea that what she seems to be interested in is status, because she's concerned about her position in the House of Moderna. And one way of doing that is to actually put Piltover on the map. So everything she does, at least from this point of view, is to do that. So you see in the next scene that the toy that she bought at the store was for this guy. So in this particular case, she's using that toy towards him as kind of a way to manipulate him. Now, you also see another member on the council who just kind of gives the guy some food, and he's, I'm allergic to that. So you see members of the council who are just either not really good at manipulating each other, not good at politics, and she's one of the better operators here. At least that's kind of the initial impression. And what's really interesting about this is that she kind of seems to know how to push people's buttons. So, in a little bit later in this particular scene here, Jace is called up in the trial, and she basically kind of needles Jace, and Jace blows up and, tells exactly, how his research is so important. Which leads to an interesting thing. So, you see this scene right here, in that she stumbles upon Jace and Victor as they're trying to unlock the door. Now, the first question is, why is she even here? I mean, it's so odd why any counselor would, of course, be wandering around at night with a flashlight. It's like, shouldn't you be at home, in your own little mansion or palace or something? Yeah, it's so odd, the timing. But the idea here is most likely that she was basically needling Jace and pretty much expected that he would be here. So she's here to set up to put more pressure on Jace so that he would finish his research. That if it amounted to something, she would be in a place to be the person who, of course, encouraged him. And if it didn't work out, hey, whatever. No loss on her side. And it turned out very well. So Jace was able to succeed, and she gets what she wants. So something revolutionary, something to put Piltover on the map. Up until this point, again, she's just kind of a political operator here, moving things forward. And then she makes another move. So from episode 4, the man of the hour, the man that who all the people in the upper area of Piltover respect is, of course, Jace, the man of progress. And you see him kind of slightly seducing him, and that's kind of a thing that Mel does. And she also puts Jace on the council because of all that's going on, and that is a good counterbalance to Heimerdinger. Now, when you look at this, it's like, okay, most likely she put Jace on the council so later she could get rid of Heimerdinger. I mean, that seems to be a reasonable calculation. After all, there are only 7 people on the council. But here's another interesting thing. If you look at the table on the council actually has 9 spots. And for some reason, 2 spots have gone missing. So, I mean, sure, it's been for however how long, it's been 7 reasons that we don't know, which would be kind of interesting if they fill in that information at some later point. But, okay, we got 8. And of course, if there's a tie, not a good thing. So you of course want to break the tie. For me, I get the idea that, Mel would know how to, do things beforehand to make sure there isn't kind of a tie situation that would keep the council deadlocked. But in any case, just kind of in general governing situation, you want odd number of people, so most likely Heimerdinger is going to be out. But the thing is, as time goes on, we kind of see how she pushes Jace to the leadership position. Isn't that very interesting? So of course Jace is like the serious guy. He's doing all the work, which is of course putting people out because they have their little corrupt deals and under the table negotiations, right? And he's put a crimp in all that, and so basically Mail had to basically look, if you want to maintain where you're at, if you want to make sure to do what you want to do, you got to play the game. And Jace was amenable to that. And so Jace is the good investment, so to speak, that Mel mentions later. But the kind of interesting thing is, as time goes on, you see that she, of course, has, shall I say, just makes out with Jace, and that kind of thing shows a more sensitive side to her. Now, up until this point, he's like, you probably think all she's really doing is just manipulating this guy. I mean, she can do it with words or with other methods, so that he's basically a pawn that moves in whatever direction that she wants. But what's interesting here is that she makes a couple of other interesting comments. One is that, at least on the episode after Progress Day, is that the Modernas often take from the world. We're not often in a position to give back. So, at least from her position, her family was all about taking things. And maybe she wasn't really happy with that. But it's like up until this point, you're like, she's like the political operative here, the Machiavellian character, the character who is doing everything for her status, her power. So it's like it all seems to be about take, moving people around the chessboard. And so giving back is like, whoa, there's something more going on here, something that we didn't quite realize. So she seems to be, well, a sort of nicer person than we initially realized. And then we also later find out that, she was exiled. Now, what's really interesting about that comment is, if you remember back in episode 2, she says, willing to risk exile for your endeavor? That's quite a conviction. So, you look at that as kind of an interesting comment at the time, but if you move it back to here, she being exiled, meaning she got exiled because of her own convictions. And so, in a way, she can kind of sympathize with other characters who would go so far to do that. So that's kind of an interesting little connection there that you have to kind of connect the dots between the series to do. And this is something that Arcane does very well. If you notice the small things that are set up in the beginning, they have a tendency to connect later on in the series. These are really good writers here. And then, as we look at that, then we move on to the fact that Mel seems a little hesitant of actually throwing Heimerdinger off the council. Now, there's two ways of looking at this. Now, there's one way is basically she and all the other members of the council are not exactly gung ho on this. And Jace was like the guy who's really pushing it. But it's like you almost feel like this is the thing that Mel wanted at the beginning here, right? I mean, that was the whole reason why she put Jace on the council. Of course, she never said any of that. So why is she so reluctant now? And obviously, it could be just the fact that most of the people were worried if they threw Heimerdinger off, what Heimerdinger would do. But Heimerdinger was like, oh, okay, fine. I'll just go off and go somewhere. So that's kind of ended up happening. Nothing bad happened, and everything moved forward. In fact, the way that Mel interacted with Chase and the rest, it just seemed like, oh, okay, things are just kind of back to normal. We'll do the normal, political munitions as we usually do. And basically, at this point, like in this particular scene, Mel is kind of pushing Jace to actually create weapons, so to speak, or at least be in a more aggressive positioning. And that even moves up to the fact when she faces uh, Jace and Victor, and pretty much says that this inaction is basically caused the problem. So up until now, Heimerdinger has done nothing, and it's all Heimerdinger's fault. It's like, wait a minute. It's like, what are you guys doing, right? I mean, you're other members of the council. You're a member of the council. Like, you didn't say or do anything. So, for a very interesting reason, he's like, okay, obviously you're decent at manipulating other members of the council. It's possible that if you didn't have Jace, you could have probably thrown him off the council for using the similar context of what's happening right now. The violence in the streets has gotten bad. We need to do something. But I guess guessing here is like she's not confident to move things forward unless she has someone to basically take the arrows instead of her. So you can kind of look at it in that way. And another thing that's interesting in this particular scene is the fact that she says the peace is already broken, but I'm only asking you to defend your people. Now, when you look at that, it's like, why your people? Because it's not Piltover. It's not our people because she's part of the council. It kind of look in that statement. It sounds like she still thinks of herself as an outsider, even though she is almost at the pinnacle of power. I mean, she's a member of the council. She's the richest person in Piltover. She's got the ear of the de facto leader of the council, Jace. She's the one that puts him there. So why is it your people? And that's kind of the thing. I think so. You see, there's like a conflict between her allegiance to the House of Medora and Piltover, and it's just kind of there. And what's also kind of interesting going on is the conflict between herself and her mother. So when she was young, of course, she basically took the diplomatic option here when she was asked by her mother, okay, what do we do with this particular heretic that popped up? Well, you can just put her in the far reaches of the empire and everything will be hunky-dory. And it's like, no, 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 no. Her mother was like, no, you kill her, because what ends up going to happen? She's going to get a bunch of followers. They're going to cause an uprising. We're going to have to put it down. It's going to be worse. That was the mother's position. Of course, you could sort of argue that if you kill the martyr, then other people use the martyr as a cause that things will get worse. It's like, six of one, half a dozen of another situation. But it established from the very beginning, Mel's initial instinct is to try to find some sort of diplomatic solution to the problem. And that's why there's a conflict between her and her mother. Now, there's also another interesting thing to note here, in that if you look at this scene right here, you'll notice the boat here. the boat with the red sails, which is the same as the boat in the red sails in the picture. Now, Mel's mother, the mother, shows up to basically tell Mel that her brother is gone. Okay, so someone in the important family was gone, because you look at the emotional reaction going, oh my god, that's not a good thing. But Mel is not really happy with the mother's interference with Jace. So pushing Jace even harder on not just, defensive measures, but to actually be more aggressive. Even though really what ended up happening was Vi was the one that pushed Jace to attack the factory. But Mel basically thought that it was her mother that was instrumental in that. And most likely it was a combination of both. But in either case, you can see this kind of antagonism between Mel and her mother. And she's not really happy. Mel just seems to be the more person who's more diplomatic, which is when you think about that. If Mel's all about trying to find a diplomatic solution to a problem, then it does make sense that she would want to have as much political power as possible so that she could get her way. Because up until this point, probably when she was the daughter of, the family, is that her mother was always getting things in the way, and so getting her way because she was the power, or maybe her father, or one of the other people, because she was talking about how Noxus was, war is, the first and only option, and Mel's totally against that. It's like, war should not be the first and only option. There are other ways we can do this, which is of course interesting. And you also notice, kind of similar to Mel, is Caitlyn, who of course doesn't like the whole cycle of violence. We need to break that. But you can kind of see interesting parallels between those two characters, even though Caitlyn's more goody two shoes than Mel ever hopes to be. And there's also another interesting thing, and that is that Mel mentions a little bit earlier, is that she kind of talks to Jason. It's like, you don't know more, but I do. And so Mel is like, we don't want to go down this particular path, even though you're going down that path. It's not a good situation. So you have that going on. So you have this kind of Machiavellian-esque character at the very beginning. And it kind of turns out that she's all about the diplomatic solution. She's all about political power, just to make sure that everything stays, kind of safe, so to speak. It's not kind of 100% for her own personal profit, or personal lust for power, or personal status. It seems to be not like that, but probably because from the family that she grew up in, the Noxus family, is you gotta basically play the game or you're going to be dead. And the way this world is set up is, people with not a whole lot of power are not going to stand around for a very long time, or they'll get basically screwed over. So you kind of have to play first. At least that seems to be the kind of impression that I get. And then what's also very interesting here is, in this conflict between Mel and her mother, towards the very end, in fact, almost the last couple of scenes, the incredibly tragic set of last couple of scenes from a certain point of view, is she takes off the ring, and the ring is the symbol of the Noxus family. So if you saw the letter that she got much earlier, you're like, oh, I see that, and this is the ring that she's been, wearing for a very long time. And she takes it off, and then, approves of Jace's initial proposal to make peace with the Undercity and independence. So the Undercity will then become the nation of Zaun. Now you look at this, and then you also look at this. So the painting that Mel had made at the very beginning. So the painting that Jay saw and the painting that Mel's mom saw is this painting right here. But Mel had basically thrown yellow paint all over it. So by taking the ring off, by ruining this painting, it seems to be indicating her break with the Noxus family. It's like, okay, I had this conflict of allegiances between Noxus and Piltover, and it's like, screw that. I'm going with Piltover. we're going to try to break this peace, even though I know that my mom would prefer a different situation where Piltover just comes in, takes over the Intercity, just uses all the weapons, and from there becomes a larger, powerful force, so that Mel's moms can use it for whatever kind of ambitions that she has. Of course, Mel's mom wants to protect her family, so you got this kind of power struggle that's probably going inside the Noxus Empire, and having Piltover as a pawn for that is not something that Mel really wants. So we see that, and then we see this. So obviously Mel is happy that this kind of agreement actually happened, which is kind of interesting in and of itself, in that there's a little bit of hand waving of how this actually happened, because obviously the other people in the council were not really happy with the whole idea of independence, but we don't see the scene where they were actually persuaded. But you kind of get an idea that, well, maybe Jace didn't make the best argument, because I've never really seen him do that, but again, it's possible. At least the two together had enough political influence and power to get the other people to go along. And then something happens, and this part of her dress glows. So obviously this has some sort of use. We don't know exactly what it is, but there you are. So this kind of leaves us with the situation is, what is it that Mel is really after? What is it that she wants? Who is this particular person? Is this person just a purely political person? We can say that no. Does she have the best interests of Piltover at heart? That is iffy. Because after all, she was a part of the council for a while and really didn't do anything with respect to the Undercity. She again was an aristocrat. She was aristocrat for most of her life, if you look at the flashbacks from Noxus. So from her point of view, it was all about political back and forth, the use of force, and all that kind of thing. So she has probably zero understanding of the Undercity, and so the issues that popped up from that is like not even within her comprehension. If she wanted to take a good faith at dealing with that, you would think that that would be something that she would, of course, put more energy into, but she did not. Most likely, her initial focus was getting as much power and as much wealth as she possibly could be, so that she could show her family, or her mother anyway, that Piltover wasn't some sort of backwater place. Even though it was the city of progress, some sort of other larger areas, empires, so to speak, with like a city. Who cares about that? A situation. So she wanted to prove that. And it was only through her interaction with Jace that you kind of get to see that between her relationship between the family of Murder and Jace is like, which one is more important? Not my family, who's basically exiled me and treated me like crap. I'm going to side with Piltover, at least to a certain extent. And so we end up having a fairly complex character who is not just some evil Machiavellian character, but is someone who probably in the future will most likely be a little bit more caring of the area that she's governing. We still don't know what's going to happen now that basically it looks like someone, Jinx, actually shot a missile into the chambers of the council. So how that's going to be resolved? Is Mel going to do a good job of protecting everyone, or is everyone dead? What will be the consequences of that? Are we going to have like full-scale warfare between Piltover and the Undercity because of this? Are they somehow going to be able to smooth it over just in time? Because it looks like Noxus is going to be back, basically knocking on these people's door, just as, because of the things that are going on over there. Who really knows? So there are just kind of areas that we would like to see how the relationship between her and Jace more develop even further. We don't know. Of course, they might not survive. Don't know. There's just so many questions, and I look forward to seeing more stuff develop in this particular character. And I'll see you in the next video. So, bye bye.